grew. That knack had manifested itself early in his life. When he was 10, their mother had given him a garden plot, a hoe, and several packets of seeds for his birthday. While most boys wanted a new bicycle, he'd busied himself with tackling the GP, as Slater and Drake called it. Translation, the Garden Project. And they'd eaten green beans with supper every night, until they'd finally begged for an ear of corn or even some spinach. Slater wasn't a picky eater, but he wasn't a big fan of spinach either. A few years ago, their mother, Blythe, had revisited her roots in the wine country of Northern California and decided to plant vineyards and produce a brand of her own. Mace had been the natural choice to run the operation. If a plant had leaves, he could make it grow and thrive in just about any soil. "When did you get back?" Mace asked, serving himself up a second breakfast now that he'd wiped out the first. Slater wondered if his brother's appetite would catch up with him one day, if Mace would pack a layer or two of fat over those lean muscles of his. No sign of it so far. "I got in last night," Slater answered. He'd slept like the proverbial rock, although he vaguely recalled a series of dreams involving a certain feisty redhead. No surprise there. Grace Emery was the last person he'd seen before he'd stripped off his clothes, showered, and fallen face first into bed. Meeting a woman like that was bound to be a memorable experience, even for somebody half dead with fatigue. Mace nodded. Slater, not usually given to idle chit-chat, kept talking. "The production went well, and we wrapped early, which almost never happens. Not by much, but early is still early." "Sweet." Mace picked up a piece of toast. "Now you go into the cutting and editing thing, huh?" "The director will handle most of that." "What comes next?" He'd been thinking about that. On some level, he was always thinking about the next project. "I've been playing with the idea of doing a history of Wyoming, how it was settled and all that, but what it also is today. Too many people seem to believe the whole state is barren, except for a ski resort or two and a couple of million sheep. I figure it might be time to update the image a little." Mace nodded again, his expression thoughtful. "You could throw in some stuff about the ranch. You know, about Dad's family and the railroad money his grandfather inherited and then used to establish the ranch. You might even include the estate in California Mom's people founded." He was warming to the idea, visibly picking up steam. Trust Mace to find a way to work the winery angle. Never mind the logic of highlighting California history in a movie about Wyoming. Slater smiled and listened. His brother was on a roll, and some of his ideas were good. "And what about this place?" Mace went on. "How many historic Wyoming ranch houses were specifically designed to look like something out of Gone with the Wind? There's a story there, don't forget." There was indeed a story. The mansion had been built back in the day to assuage the homesickness of their great-grandmother, a young Southern bride, far from home and yearning for the plantation of her childhood. By now, Mace was so caught up in the impromptu brainstorming session that he waved a fork in enthusiasm. "I think it would make a great project. You could call it The Carson Legacy, one family's journey in the Great West." Slater smiled again. "Okay, the Carson clan made its mark, I'll grant you that. But there were a lot of other pioneers, too." Mace grinned back at him. "I wouldn't mind seeing myself immortalized on film," he said. That was when Drake wandered in, yawning, probably not from lack of sleep, but because he'd been out tending horses since the crack of dawn.